ladies and lads. Welcome to another episode of Unfollow, Question Everything. You guys are just eating up these episodes lately, but this one might be your favorite. And I realize I say that like all the time, but this topic is so important and it's kind of everywhere. So am I dealing with the narcissist? We have the most beautiful, amazing, licensed couple therapists here, Colette Fehr. You guys have been eating up her episodes from this season, and I am really excited to have this conversation because just before we were getting on this recording, Colette and I were talking about the importance of this subject matter. So, am I dealing with the narcissist? And we have 5 amazing questions that Colette has developed for you to help you identify and cope if you have someone that is close to you that has narcissism. Hi, Colette. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great, Melissa. Thanks for having me
Welcome
on again.
back. You just I love it. I just feel like we should do these every week. It's so great. I love it.
It's so much fun.
It's so easy for us and we just love it. And we would be having these conversations even if it was not being recorded for you. But we love that you get access to this. So let's talk a little bit about narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, the differences. Let's just sort of get that as our foundation before we dig in here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. So narcissistic personality disorder is estimated to be only about, now the experts even don't, about 1%, but anywhere from 0.5% to 2%. So it's really not that common that someone is a full-blown narcissist. Now, 1% is still a lot of people. So I'm certainly not suggesting that you're not dealing with a full-blown narcissist, but in pop culture today, we bandy this term about left and right. And the most likely thing, first of all, some people are just jerks, okay? They're not a narcissist, they're just a jerk. Not every jerk is a narcissist. However, narcissism and narcissistic features can be prevalent. And to some degree, it's healthy to have some narcissism. This is sort of how we see ourselves through rose-colored glasses. We need some of that or we wouldn't take risks. We wouldn't put ourselves out there. It's good to see ourselves as special. We just don't want to see ourselves as too special. That's when it becomes a problem.
I think that's really important. Too special. And by the way, I just want to start by everyone saying when they listen to this episode, something that will happen to you is you will start asking, oh my God, am I a narcissist? Because when I started diving into this topic, I was like, oh wait, I have some of that. Oh wait, I have a little, oh my God, did I do that? Right? So when you're listening to this, don't freak out, okay? It's probably unlikely. You may have some tendencies in some little parts of your personality, which is what essentially Colette is saying, right?
Yes.
There's part of us that some people will say a narcissist is vain. Okay, well, I would say sometimes I'm vain. I like to wear nice clothes. I like to get my nails done. That doesn't make me a narcissist.
Right, exactly. And I'm saying that it's healthy to have some narcissism and common. Now, what is also common, though, is that you may be in a relationship with someone or have a family member or a close friend who has higher narcissistic features. And that can make somebody very difficult to deal with. And we'll delve into it with these questions, but I just want to focus on a couple of overall things.
Okay.
That people who have higher levels of narcissism tend to be attention seeking. They tend to lack empathy. And they actually will struggle more with true emotional intimacy. They can often be very charming and charismatic, but not every narcissist. The reason this often goes undetected is not everyone's obsessed with being in the spotlight. It doesn't only show up that way, but there is this belief that I am special and entitled and it's all about me. And not enough thinking about other people. And this is what can make it so challenging to be in any kind of relationship with someone who's highly narcissistic. Now, one more thing I really want to point to here, because this is absolutely true and I think is misunderstood sometimes, that people think narcissists are so full of themselves and arrogant, but the reality is beneath that veneer, whether it's the very ostentatious, boastful, in your face kind of version or the more quiet version, narcissists have a very unstable and fragile sense of self. Even those who are highly narcissistic and may not meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, they're insecure. They don't think they're good enough. And that is why they have an excessive need for validation and attention.
Wow. Okay, let's dig in.
Yes.
Okay, so number one, do they seek excessive validation or become upset or modify if they're not praised?
Yeah. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and it's constantly about validating them, I mean, obviously people want to have appreciation and good feedback. There should be a back and forth of that in all of our close relationships. But you should not be responsible for propping up and managing someone else's sense of self.
I mean, it's hard enough doing it for yourself, right?
Right.
And it's also just that idea of like happiness, you know, and wholeness being such an inside job, right? Like I could do anything and I could try my best to make you, Colette, feel happy, feel whole, feel all of those things. And then when I stop doing that, guess what? You're right back to square one, right? Like
Exactly.
I can't give you that. You can't give me that. And I think we're learning a lot about that in relationships now because there's, like you said, you know, in the last episode, we're talking about it a lot more that like, really, this is an inside job for you. It can't be the responsibility of someone else. But my understanding is if you have someone who has a lot of these narcissistic tendencies, that they do believe that that is your job.
Exactly. And they will try to pin that job on you.
Yeah.
So this is often why people who are highly narcissistic end up with people who are very empathic and can sometimes be what others describe as codependent, right? And just to differentiate codependence from healthy interdependence, it's when you are, you know, it's normal to be dependent on someone when you love them. What is not normal is when you sacrifice yourself, your own boundaries, and you make the other person's needs more important than your own. So you have to, in a relationship, if someone's pretty narcissistic and they're constantly looking at you to fill them up, drop everything and cater to them and their emotional needs, regardless of what's going on in your life, validate them to the point where, if this is what I see a lot in couples therapy, that spouses who are highly narcissistic, oh, you're not giving me enough attention. Well, I'm going to go find it elsewhere, and really blaming that person. You know, that's a great sign that somebody's pretty narcissistic, because it is an inside job. We have to take care of ourselves. And then a partner is a secondary caretaker, not the primary.
Yeah, I think, and whenever I'm working with couples, I'm like, your job for each other is to help each other grow and heal. That is the job of when you come together and you're in that couple, like you're going to encourage each other to grow and heal, but not do the work for each other.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, people who grow up with a narcissistic parent often play this role from childhood, that they have to make mom feel better. They have to cater to mom. It's all about, is mom okay? And, you know, then they grow up and that feels normal in a relationship with a close friend or a spouse. So I want to encourage listeners, first of all, most of us have dealt with somebody pretty narcissistic at work, in our family, in friendships, or a partner at some point in life.
Yeah.
And this is something that it's not always easy to spot, but by recognizing if someone's looking to you to constantly fill them up, that is not your job, and you can fire yourself from that job, whether they're trying to pin it on you or not.
Gosh, I love that. And so, you know, what would you say to someone at home who, you know, is dealing with that, right? Like, because I think we've talked a little bit about this, right? Where there are many people who have these types of people in their realm, right? Like you either work with them, it can be a sibling, it can be a parent, it could be your spouse, it could be one of your children, right? Like and you're not deleting those people from your life. You know, you're not exiting a relationship with your mother or your father or your kid or your grown adult kid. You know, those things are going to stay around. And so if they are looking for that excessive validation and becoming upset and moody if they're not praised, what sort of things do you kind of do to help your clients in that situation?
Well, I think it comes down to developing your own ego strength. And again, like as we talk about consistently, being able to tolerate somebody else's displeasure, which is not always easy. It's okay to disappoint people and not give them what they want in all contexts, not just narcissists. But I do want to acknowledge that somebody who's pretty narcissistic will make it tough. You know, they can make it really tough on you. And sometimes we do have to end relationships. If somebody is really a true, full-blown narcissist, it's going to be very hard to ever have a healthy relationship. And in fact, that's one of the features that marks a personality disorder. So you may get to the point where you really need to get out in order to be okay. And that's a very individual decision that often requires the help of a therapist or a coach to come to. But if it's the case of somebody who's narcissistic and you're not planning to cut them out and you don't feel that you need to, just developing that muscle and validating yourself that it's okay to say no, it's okay to disengage, and that you're not going to get guilted into the bullshit. And I think it's just practice. It's just practice pushing back.
I love what you said earlier, you know, about a lot of us who have ever had narcissistic parents then find a lot of comfort in narcissistic relationships, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I had one client who was like, you know, you're dating someone who was really kind and really nice, and they were like, oh, this is boring, right? And I was like, oh no, boring is so great. Boring is so awesome.
Healthy.
Like, love the boring. Like, growing old and being in love is growing bored with someone else. Like, please, right? Like, can we reframe this part of like what relationships are truly about? I have chills all over my arms, but like truly, it's like, you know, and it's sort of a lot of it. I think what I love about the work that you do, Colette, is like, you know, working with that in the couple setting, that individual to be like, you have this pattern and we're going to have to unlearn it in order to make this relationship healthy, right? Like in order to be healthy for yourself, this is something you're going to have to unlearn that. And sometimes it's just like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize that that's what I'm attracted to is like chaos and drama. And, oh, I'm comfortable in it because I had that in my parents. And so now I'm seeking it somewhere else.
Yes, we gravitate towards what's familiar. And then also we are unconsciously repeating dynamics. They don't always look exactly the same at the surface, so we don't realize we're doing it. But we're unconsciously drawn to a similar underlying dynamic in the attempt to resolve, heal the wound, learn the lesson. Yeah. And, you know, this is the task of life. It is the growth and evolution. And this is something that we get better at. You know, I used to be a narcissistic magnet because I am very empathetic and very understanding. And part of probably what makes me a good therapist, and I've always been naturally, so I can always see the other side. Always. And I can be too understanding. Oh, well, of course you know, did this to me because you were hurting, right? You didn't call me for 2 weeks because you were hurt, because you felt insecure and all of that. Like, yeah, we can see where people are coming from, but it doesn't excuse the way they treat us. So in my earlier adult life, I was always, and then of course I'm heterosexual. So I was often attracted to these really alpha, high achieving men who can be conditioned by society to be more narcissistic, and that's valuable. And they would be drawn to my warmth and empathy. But you know what? I mean, I'm married for a long time now, but I don't attract narcissistic people. Or if I do, they don't stay around long because I have really good boundaries and I don't put up with bullshit anymore. So even though I'm still that empathetic, I'm like the gooey brownie on the inside, but I'm only letting some people through the shell.
Yeah, there's only so many people that are allowed to have some of the brownie, right? Like, for sure. I totally get it. I'm the exact same personality. I think that's what made me a good lawyer in my first career, was my ability to always see both sides of everything. Like, you could present, we have these little cards that we do at dinner table, and one of them is called debate. And we put the card out and we like debate it, because I really believe in like healthy conflict in a family. Like, I do not want everybody to be a Melissa Wiggins. Please, God, no. Like, make more different people than me, right? Like, and so I'm like, okay, you debate this side and I'll debate this side, and we'll like debate it out. But I can see I can see both sides any day of the week. Like, and I am an extremely empathetic person and very understanding. And so, like, you have gone through seasons of attracting many personalities like that to myself, like moth to a flame.
Exactly. And that's what I want to also encourage people, that no matter what you may have tolerated in the past or not understood, you can't control how narcissistic someone else is or whether they're going to run their game on you, but you can change what you do in response. And the less you give in and the less you supply, right? That's a very common term, the narcissistic supply. Somebody who's narcissistic wants to get a rise out of you. They want all that attention. And if you're not providing it or giving them what they want, they're going to get bored of you.
Well, let's talk about that too, because the other part is it doesn't matter if it's good or bad attention, right? So there, like I heard Dr. I think it was Ramani. I think I'm saying that wrong, right? But saying, they want to play tennis with you and you need to play solitaire, right? Where they want to bully it back and forth. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative or good or bad. Like, they're just needing to fill their supply. So if you're not going to give them the positive, good, loving attention they want, then you're going to find yourself maybe in a fight or an argument with them.
Right. And this is where the whole idea of gray rocking, which I love that term, and I'm glad that this has become more widely known. The gray rock is, right, it's not shiny, it's not colorful, it's just sort of there in the background, not moving. That when we're not engaging and giving that back and forth, that's the best way to get the narcissist to move on. And I was in a relationship for a very long time with someone who had a lot of narcissistic features. And I'm Italian American and I have a lot of passion and expressiveness. And what I'm really saying here is it's very easy to get a rise out of me. I have an excitable personality. So this is also something that would really draw narcissistic people to me, is that if you needle me,
she'll play with me.
She'll play, she'll react. I'm not good at not giving a reaction. So I had to really, I'm still working on this. There's
forever.
Certain people,
we will work on it forever together. We'll be okay.
Yeah, but I've gotten better at it. So, this is just something to keep working at.
Yeah. All right. So, is there a pattern of gaslighting or twisting reality to fit their narrative? Do you have some examples of what that might look like?
Yeah. So you try to share your feelings or let me say it this way. This is, I think, one of the most common ones. Okay. And again, we're not saying everyone who does this is a narcissist, but this is kind of a narcissistic tactic.
Yeah.
Is that you are upset about something and you bring it forward. Like, let me think of a specific example. Like, I've felt lonely lately, or, we haven't had any quality time. And immediately the narrative is flipped with defensiveness or dismissiveness. And then suddenly they're upset that you're upset with them. And this happens a lot when people are narcissistic, because it happens with other people too, but because they don't really have a core solid sense of self and self-esteem. So number one, they can't tolerate or take any accountability. They can't tolerate really having made a mistake. It's going to get turned around on you. And gaslighting, which I know has gotten overused, it really does happen a lot. It's, somebody making you question your own reality. So with my example I'm giving now, it would be, well, that's not true. I have been home every night and blah, 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 blah. And I've given you this attention and that attention. And you're so difficult. There's no pleasing you.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I do, I try so hard to be a good spouse and you're just never happy. And then all of a sudden you're caretaking their fragile ego. You're the one who had a complaint and a hurt feeling and a need. All of that's been dismissed. And now suddenly they're the victim and you're the bad guy.
Oof.
It's messed up. And it's actually, that is extremely common.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I am one of those people that can be quite defensive sometimes, like, especially in relationship setting. It can be like, oh my gosh. And I think a lot of that sometimes can be wrapped up in that perfectionism that we talked about, last time. I definitely have been trying to let go of many perfectionist ways. And I think that sometimes that can come across as like, I'm defending this action because you don't want to be misunderstood. And so, if you're listening and you're like, oh, I have some of these tendencies, like, it doesn't mean that you're a narcissist, okay?
Right.
So don't start freaking out, but you want to take check of when you're doing those things, right? Because if you're dealing with that in a relationship, you're going to be met with this every single time, right? This is just sort of the norm of their behavior. It's always the excessive validation. It's always you're upset if you're not praised. It's always the gaslighting and the dismissing and defensive. And dismissing is a big one, I think, too.
Oh yeah. And to differentiate for people who are listening, getting defensive is really common for exactly what you say. We don't want to be misunderstood. And also, we all want to be seen as a good person, especially with our partner. So if our partner comes with complaints, it's hard sometimes not to get defensive and to say, oh, wait, look at, that's not true. I'm good and I love you. And let me show you all the things I am doing. But this is different from what I'm pointing to here, because it's not just defensiveness. It's then tearing down your reality and not allowing you to have your feelings. So you may be a great person and maybe you were home every night and we don't agree on the facts of the situation, because there's always two subjective realities anyway. But somebody is going to be able to say, somebody who is healthier is going to be able to say, I can see that you feel this way, but I also want to tell you why, I'm still a good partner. Yeah. Somebody who's narcissistic is not going to acknowledge your feelings. And then they're going to tell you that your narrative is wrong, that your feelings are wrong, and that actually they're the victim of you. That's such a key part of it. They are always the victim.
Always the victim, and then always twisting the reality. I think that is a big one too, right? I was home every night and I was I wasn't anywhere. I don't understand.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. You're difficult. You're imagining things. That's not true. I mean, it's so confusing to
start to feel crazy. That is something to think about. If you're dealing with a narcissist, you will start to think that you are a crazy person. That am I just crazy? Am I is this true? You literally will start to question your reality. And that's what Colette is talking about.
Yes. And back to being empathetic, this is why it's so difficult, because being a good partner is trying to hear the other person's reality and kind of see it from the vantage point of what it's like to be in their shoes. The problem is when somebody's really narcissistic and they're always flipping the game on you, you're then going, okay, wait, am I wrong? Maybe I'm not being fair or reasonable here. And before you know it, you're the frog in boiling water. Yep. And, you've just been cooked alive because someone's constantly invalidating your reality. And this is where I say that sometimes, if somebody does this perpetually, you've got to really stand firm in your own truth. And that may take some processing and even turning to a friend or a therapist or a coach to talk these things through. But this is also where you may have to end a relationship. It's really difficult to be close to someone who does this to you constantly.
Yeah. And I think that, from some of my clients, some of the things that I hear too is that it doesn't matter what they do, right? So, like, I don't think the narcissist is really interested in the solution. So if you did say, oh, okay, I see, I get that you're feeling lonely. Like, what are some ways that I can, try and have they're not really interested in the solution, right? Like, there's that part of it too, where that also can make you feel like you're crazy because I'm offering these solutions, but it's never enough. Because like you said earlier, when you used the word supply, like they need it like every day.
Yeah, and it's a bottomless pit. You're never going to be able to fill the well with enough because this is a person that can't fill themselves, as we all have to do. And like when you talk about narcissism developing in childhood, it's really often, and this is why I have more empathy for narcissism as a therapist than I used to. I do personally believe that there are some people of the malignant type of narcissism who perhaps are just born this way with like a missing switch, right? That are really far on the spectrum, narcissistic personality disorder, where they have no empathy, and it's closer to sociopathy and antisocial personality disorder. But for the most part, narcissism develops from attachment injuries when we're young, that we're either overly praised and coddled and made the center of the universe. So then we grow up thinking we're entitled and expecting everyone to treat us that way. Or we don't get any attention. Nobody's paying attention to our needs or tending to us. And so children will develop an inflated sense of self as a coping mechanism to survive.
Yeah.
So, the root cause we can have empathy for, but you cannot allow this person to turn you into their bottomless pit of supply.
Yeah, become the punching bag of, their lack of it. Yeah. It's do they frequently belittle or dismiss your feelings and experiences? Belittling is major. And this is so tied to the other question, but it's so important. Emotional connection in a relationship, not just in a romantic partnership. Right. Emotional connection is the heart of all relationships. We feel closest to those that we can share openly what we think and feel, and there's acceptance for that, and they share back. And you just don't get this with people who are narcissistic. First of all, they cannot develop true intimacy. So they're not going to share the real self that's under all those layers of protection. And when you try to share the real self, it's going to get twisted, and your feelings are going to be consistently dismissed and belittled. Yeah. What is belittling?
Belittling is mocking someone for feeling how they feel.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. You're so dramatic. I mean, I say you're so dramatic because I have a theatrical personality, but in one of my longest term relationships in my life that started very young, I would constantly be told I was dramatic in a belittling way.
Yeah.
So I'd get upset and it would be like, well, Colette, this is just because you're so dramatic.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck you, first of all. And right. So it's like, now you're turning around my character on me, making it a negative and using it as a way to dismiss taking any accountability for something I might be upset about, and being willing to lean in it all and try to understand me so that we can be more connected.
Yeah, I think the mocking is huge, and I've definitely seen that in some of my couples, right? Where, they'll use quotation marks or say it in a little accent or like in a smart assy way that is not kind or helpful, right? Like if it's not kind and helpful, it's said in a way to make the other person feel like they're a piece of crap, not that they're good and whole, and it can be perpetual. That's kind of what we're talking about right now. We're not saying that, you've got in an argument with your spouse and you've maybe done something unkind or said something unkind. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about every time you get into a confrontation with this person, they mock you, whether it's the way you say something you've said, they'll extract it, they'll make fun of that thing, or something you've done. Oh, you think you're so great because you've done this, like it's that type of thing.
Exactly. It's a pervasive pattern. We've
Yes.
all made an unfortunate remark or said something hurtful in a difficult moment. That doesn't make you a narcissist, but someone as consistently mocking you, belittling you, being sarcastic is a huge one about you, passive aggressive digs, and what are called ad hominem attacks, right? Attacking your character instead of the situation. So anyone can do that as a one-off, and it's not great for a relationship period, but we're all human. But someone who's narcissistic is going to do this almost every time, if not every single time. In fact, probably the more narcissistic they are, the more this is good. You're not going to get anything but that.
And the character attacks, this is really one of the things that, and we've talked about this, right? Where the character attacks is really what starts to then eat away at you, right?
Exactly.
And so we talked at the beginning of this episode about there are some narcissists where you're never going to be able to have them exit your life, or you choose not to, right? Like it's a sibling you want to have a relationship with. It's an adult child you choose to have a relationship with, right? Like you're making that choice, right?
Right.
But then there's other circumstances where if it starts to eat away at you at the point of where you then do start to doubt yourself, your self-belief starts to go away, your confidence goes away, you become isolated from people, right? The little remarks about your friends or, always making fun of other people too, right? Like that's one as well. Like these little things that then just start to really create this different way of how you operate in the world. That's when I see the big problem. That's when it's like, okay, this person has had enough access to you and enough changing of you. Like you got to cut it.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to everyone's situation is different. And I understand some people have kids or financial situations, but if you're in a romantic partnership with somebody who's highly narcissistic or does meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, having absolutely no empathy and really being emotionally and sometimes physically abusive, those relationships, if you can possibly get out, that's really what you need to do after years and years of doing couples therapy. I mean, there's just some people, you're not going to ever get anything different.
Yeah.
And if someone's abusing you, it will destroy your sense of self.
Yeah.
So, and
not that that's from that, you've seen that too, with your couples that have decided okay, this is best to not be. And then just the years and years of rebuilding yourself.
Right. Coming out of that and recalibrating. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. Do they turn on charm and charisma on and off like a light switch, but put others down to feel superior and retaliate when offended? So yeah, we were just kind of talking about that. Put down others to feel superior is huge because it's constant and they don't even know they're doing it. It's just how they operate.
Yep. And you can look at, I'll stay away from any current political affiliations, of course, but you can just look at what goes on in modern politics, whatever side of the fence you're on. We don't talk about issues as much in these debates as we used to. It's all character attacks and these petty, childish arguments that do nothing for the American people. And that's another whole issue. But you can see and think about it, just even politicians in general. That's such a tough business to be in. So it is going to attract, I'm not saying everyone in politics is a narcissist, hardly, but it's going to attract people potentially with higher levels of narcissism because you have to have a thick skin to survive that business.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times when candidates are running, it's based on knocking the other person down. But when it comes to a personal relationship, when you're dealing with someone who's narcissistic, they want to always be in the superior position. They want to be in control. They want to be the one controlling the dialogue, and they want to make you feel small and them to feel bigger to meet the needs of their voracious ego. So things like what goes on in this question, turning on charisma or charm when it benefits them. Not every narcissist does that, but a lot of them do. Putting other people down to feel superior and then retaliating when offended instead of saying, that really hurt me and let me repair and tell you why. It's, I'm going to get you back.
I'm going to win. I'm going to win.
Yes.
Yeah, bring it. bring it type of thing. Yeah, bring
And
it.
winning is all about feeling superior for the needs of the ego.
Well, and what you said at the beginning was, you know, and I've talked about this with some of my parent clients too, right? Like, this is not saying, you know, not to make your child feel special, but not to make them feel like they're more special than everybody else. And that's what the pulling down piece is all about, is I'm more special than you. And let me just remind everybody around me by making a joke about the person that's like teaching the class right now. Let me like pull them down. And it's like, constant, right? Like the constant pulling down of everybody in different situations, and just sort of, it doesn't look good, and it doesn't feel good to be around. But once you start to see that, like, that's what it is, then you know that's what they're doing. And then the on and off is like, you know, if there's a friend that they might like of yours, they might act a certain way, or a family member of yours, they might act a certain way. But if there's one that they're just like, not bothered, I might just go into the other room and just hang out in here because I don't really give a crap about that other person. Right. And it's like, so, and I think, you know, when you're an empathetic person, you can be like, well, they were just having a hard day, and there's a lot. And I think that's why some of these couples are together for so long, is because the empathetic person is like so understanding of, oh, they were having a bad day, work has been stressful, right? Like, but it's like, if you're 10 years down the line and it's still all of these excuse making, like, this is when you want to really look at this stuff. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And you will find with people who are highly narcissistic that they don't have healthy relationships. They may have a wide circle of superficial relationships, and even some that seem close because they can turn on and off the charm, and they know how to feign empathy often. Now, some don't even bother with that, but many people who are highly narcissistic do. So it can take, and this is another thing I really want to normalize, that as much as we're all talking about narcissism, it can be very difficult to spot when you're dealing with someone really narcissistic. There are versions that are super obvious, like someone famous I won't mention, but then there are versions that are really more covert, and it takes time to realize. So you'll see, though, that if you're really in a close relationship with a narcissist, you may be colluding with them, which is what we're going to get into in the next question. Because otherwise, if you're not colluding with them, meaning you're not giving them supply, you're not allowing them to run their game, they're not going to continue to like engage with you because they're not getting what they need out of the relationship. So the healthier you get, the more a narcissist will leave you alone.
Yeah. Like, you're, you know, they tell the joke and make fun of someone and you don't laugh. You're not feeding it anymore. You're not supplying it anymore.
Right. Or they say, oh my gosh, you did this. You made me feel this way. You're not making me feel better about this thing. You're not paying attention to me. And if you're not really reacting to that and saying, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way, and like carry on, right? Gray rocking that a little bit, they're going to see it's like a child, right? When a child has a tantrum and the parent doesn't react, eventually the kid is like, all right, this isn't working.
Do they tend to have a lack of emotional maturity? Is that part of it?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. They can't tolerate or regulate emotions. And the only way they really regulate their emotions then is getting that chaos and getting that feed and fix to feel better. So imagine that you need a constant supply of other people adoring you, fixating on you, and focusing on you to feel good. That's a really dangerous premise for both parties.
For sure. Okay, last question. What do you need to do to take care of yourself in dealing with this person?
So this can be both a big question and also a small question.
Okay.
So, you know, globally, when you're dealing with someone who's narcissistic, do you need to end the relationship? You know, sometimes even with family members, family cutoffs are really big right now. And maybe sometimes, you know, people are unfairly urging people to end a relationship that might not need to end. But sometimes you do have to cut off even a parent or a sibling, and certainly a partner, because the relationship is so unhealthy, even with the best of boundaries, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself and be okay. And that can be a very difficult decision, and one that probably requires some really thoughtful, ethical, professional help to come to. But in the micro, it's asking yourself, let's say you are in a relationship, how much time and energy am I going to give this person? What layer of intimacy can I allow safely without compromising myself? So let's say you have a very narcissistic friend and she's been your friend since you're a child and you don't want to cut her off. But whenever you're with her, it drains your battery and it's constantly about her. You know, you may say to yourself, I'm not going to end this relationship, but you know what? I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this person.
Yeah, I'm going to limit it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got to take care of you. And that really is your job, no matter what someone's throwing at you.
I think one of the most important things that you've said in this entire episode for me is the healthier you get, the more you get to see it, right? And that is really what both of us are all about, right? Is making people do this work, encouraging people to do this work over and over and over as long as it takes to create that favorite version of your life, to create that best life that people talk about, to create that favorite version of you. Why? Because the healthiest version of you operates different in this world.
Yes. Because if you're not giving supply to someone who's narcissistic, if you're refusing to engage, if you don't allow your reality to be questioned, once you've identified that that's what you're dealing with, right? You stand firm in your truth. You say no, you walk away, you limit time. You don't stand on your head to try to explain yourself or feed their inflated ego. They're going to move on. Now, if it's narcissistic abuse, they probably won't move on when it rises to the level of abuse. And that's where you really may need to end a relationship.
Why is that? If it's narcissistic abuse, they tend not to?
Because when someone's really got the malignant kind of narcissism, they're in it for the challenge. They're going to do whatever they can to abuse you, rope you. And even if you're not responding with a ton of supply, that's their only MO. And they don't want to give up on that. Now, if they find a new shiny object to fixate on, then they may move away from you.
Yeah. Well, this has been a beautiful conversation about a hard topic, right? It's not easy to talk about this. And I'm really, for everyone that showed up and is listening to this and is sharing it with their family and friends, just take note to what Colette said. The healthier you get, the more you will start to see whether these behaviors are this or not. And you'll just start to know. And you'll start to feel that, they have entitlement. they belittle all the time. They mock all the time. They turn that switch on and off. These behaviors consistently over and over, you have to start to believe what it is what it is.
Yeah. And if there's never space for you in a relationship, you're probably dealing with someone who's at least narcissistic. They may not have the full-blown personality disorder. And to me, the greatest value of recognizing isn't labeling and saying, they're just a narcissist, so there's nothing I can do. It's understanding that if I'm dealing with this, then I have choices to make about how much engagement I have with this person and how I take care of myself around my dealings with this person. That's why it's really helpful to know that this may be a factor.
I love it. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Colette, for joining us again. This has been an incredible episode. And I know we're going to do more on this topic because it's a big one and how to help people with it. But until then, thank you so much for everybody that tuned in for this season with Colette. I have loved it so much.
Me too.
I know that it will not be our last season for sure. And do you have any words you would like to leave us with as we wrap up this amazing season that we've done? I mean, we've really covered some really important topics, and I'm really proud of this season we've done.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we've mentioned throughout, really focusing on the inner work and connecting to yourself. Having a better life and living your best life is about knowing who you are and standing in that and being different and knowing that you are a flawed and beautiful human being, but that you don't have to get other people to see and accept you. You have to get yourself to see and accept you. That's the key.
I love it. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Colette. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Melissa. See you all soon.